Something like, that's my niece. This is the first time that I've given my testimony, I guess, to what you'd call normal people. I've given it in a prison ministry setting several times, and the audience is quite different there. I have a captive audience there.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to open up in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity to share my testimony. Basically, Lord, share your testimony through me, Lord, because it's only you that did a mighty work, Lord. And Lord, I just want to give you all the praise and honor and glory. And Lord, most of all, what I'm thankful for is your long-suffering, your patience to let me live long enough to finally get it, Lord. And I just praise you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to start from when I was real young. I was born, fortunately, luckily, and always thankfully, in the country, on a farm. And I'm 70 years old, so some of you guys might catch some of what I'm talking about. I caught the tail end of the thrash machine era. You know, I've pitched hay to a thrash machine. I've tamped grass seed sacks. And, you know, I grew up hard work and good country values. Neighbor helping neighbor. We had a community thrash machine that would go from farm to farm to farm to farm. When I was born, I was a sickly child, so my brother was right on my heels, and my sister was right under his heels, and my brother was right under her heels. So my mom and dad being a young couple, my grandparents lived about a half a mile away. So my grandparents pretty much raised me. They were my rock, you know. I mean, I could always depend on my grandparents. Like I said, I learned good country values. As I grew up, I began to play baseball, basketball. I played football, assistant had it, but I run track. I was like an athlete, and then I worked. I mean, all I know was work. You know, country boys, that's what they do, you know. Buck bales and split wood, and, you know, it was the greatest life. I would rather have the childhood I had as to be Donald Trump's son. You know, I mean, it really would. And in that era, it was just, I don't know, don't have the explanation, but I wasn't a church kid. My parents and my grandparents did not go to church, even though in my grandmother's house, in the living room, on the coffee table, was a great big old Bible. There's a piano in the living room, Christian sheet music on it, and I heard she used to be a worship leader in a church somewhere. But what happened, I don't have a clue. I didn't ask, nobody ever said. But my dad come home from the Navy, an alcoholic. He drank Signum 7, Stag beer, smoked Camel cigarettes all day, all night, every day. But he's a good father, loving father. But like I said, my grandparents were my anchor. And, but one thing that, you know, he went to Anna a couple times to try to kick it, but he couldn't do it. He would come right back and be right back in it. But one thing that they always did was they wanted us to go to vacation Bible school. And I enjoyed it too, because it was like a vacation. I mean, it was during the summer. I got to see my friends that I went to school with that I didn't get to see. And, you know, I learned about Jesus Christ and about heaven and hell. And, you know, it really, you know, all the verses you learn and you know, you memorize verses, and you know how it is in vacation Bible school. But one January night. It was really cold. I got home from basketball practice and did my homework. We lived in a 4-room house with a wood stove in the middle, no indoor plumbing. Wood stove was our heat. I did my homework and went to bed. The next morning, Mom woke us kids up and said we didn't have to go to school today because Dad had died last night, had a heart attack at 40 years old. And, you know, I mean, I remember going to the visitation and my grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and everybody just crying and, you know, I mean, but I was numb. Something happened. There was no feelings. I just kept wishing he'd get up out of that thing and come home. And of course, the next day we went to the funeral. Same thing, you know, and I just watched him. I just was still hoping. I was still hoping he'd get up out of that thing and come home. But whenever they finally closed the lid and we took him out to Brown Cemetery and put him in the ground, it was like, but I had no feelings. It was just like something, I don't know. And I thought to myself, how, the things I learned in Vacation Bible School, I just thought, how could a good God send my dad, who's a good man, yeah, he was a good father, to hell? Yeah, I just, you know, yes, he drank. No, he didn't go to church. I never heard the word Jesus from him in any form. It wasn't, we never, if I would have said a cuss word when I was a kid, ooh, it wouldn't have been good. But, you know, I just decided in my heart at that time I was gonna live for me, myself, and I. Me, myself, and I. And that's exactly what I did. I continued for a few years to play sports, you know, and work and help Grandpa. And it just, when I turned old enough to start running around with the older kids, it was drinking and running around. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie American Graffiti. That's my favorite movie, one of them. But that's kind of what we did, you know. We drank, run around, and chase girls, and, you know. And I just kind of, I quit doing athletics. If I hadn't, I'd be playing professional baseball right now. No, I'm just kidding. I would, in my mind, yes, but no. But, you know, I started going with a girl from Fairfield, and her family went to church. So, you know, I went to church, but I didn't go to church for the right reasons. And that happens. That happens. Girls are fooled by people who will just play the part, you know. And another thing I wanted to say, you know, because I really ain't got this in order or nothing, so it's going to be like parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, you don't know how important it is to let your little ones see that when they see you in that box, they know where you're at. There's no wondering, because, you know, you think your life is your own, but it's not. Your life affects so many others. But anyway, come time to graduate high school, and see, my dad was in the Navy, and he always wanted me to be in the Navy. And I wanted to be a Blue Angel pilot, I really did. But when my dad died, that dream died too. It just, you know. But my girlfriend at the time wanted to get married. My grandpa and grandma wanted me to take over the family farm. Vietnam was still going on, it was winding down, but I signed up for the draft. I went down to the recruiter and I said, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going to happen. And he said, well, you signed up for the draft. You're going to get a lottery number. If your number is 200 or less, you just want to volunteer and get it over with. But if it's 200 or more, don't worry about it. Never forget that number, 326. So that pretty well determined my future. So I got married. I started farming. Grandpa had 320 acres, a Super M International, 3-bottom plow tractor. You know, we had a 8-end Ford with a 4-row cultivator because we used to cultivate with a Super C and a 2-row cultivator. You talk about rough. And some of you guys will know what I'm talking about, but you know, that was rough. But anyway, you know, some of the kids that I had graduated with, you know, the Atwoods and the Kaisers and, be quiet, never mind, I didn't say that. Can skip that part. But some of the kids was gonna become big farmers, and they did, successful farmers. And, you know, I mean, we had 30 head of beef cows, and, you know, I didn't make much money. I mean, we barned bottom ground, and, you know, we didn't really put on fertilizer and herbicide and all that stuff like we do today. And there was no insurance, there was no crop insurance, there was no Willie Nelson money, there was none of that stuff, you know, and it was, you know how it was back in the day. It was rough to be a farmer. That's why there's not very many small farmers today. But the ones that stayed in, you know, my hat's off to them. But so I decided I needed to work somewhere else too. And I talked to my ag teacher, and he told me that, you know, if I started milking, you know, I wouldn't have to have a big farm. I could make enough money, and I had 2 brothers that was old enough to help me and wanted to help me. And so I bought some milk cows, but I never quit working. I went from Anaconda to Valley Steel and working nights and milking cows and farming. And we had a trailer, probably from here to your black camper, away from the milk house. My wife, you know, she had 2 small children, and living that close to a cattle barn, you can imagine. And she was a city girl, and I was never home, but I told her, I said, you know, you got the car, you got the money, you just go do what you want, you know. But I wasn't a husband. My priorities was not right. I wasn't being the husband, the father that I should be. I was thinking about, because I grew up where the man provides, you know. That's just was instilled in me. But after several years of just doing that, finally I come home from Valley Steel one night, and the cotton picking trailer was gone. Just like that, just disappeared. I wondered, what in the world? Anyway, I went and found her at Fairfield. She had moved it to Fairfield and got a job and said, I don't love you. I want a divorce. And I was tired, and I said, yeah, what do you want? I don't care, you know. She said, I don't want the trailer and child support. I said, okay. I said, I'm not signing no paper. You just do whatever. And, you know, anyway, we got divorced, and I was my ex's first husband. Imagine that. Anyway, I went down to write my first child support check, and they wouldn't take it. I said, oh yeah, maiden name, I forgot. No, she's remarried. I go, what? It's only been a month, or whatever, you know. And whenever she first told me that, I quit working at Valley Steel, something I should have did a long time ago. And I bought a Harley Davidson, and I started drinking and running around, and stuff wasn't getting done. I mean, the milking wasn't getting done like it should, you know. I mean, my brothers was old enough that they were beginning to want to take their own lives, you know. They had girlfriends, was wanting to get married, and, you know. And I went down and I seen my ex, and I parked the bike down the street, and I come up a summer night, and screen door, and the door was open, and I just walked up and I looked in, and there's some guy, and he's sitting on my couch watching my TV with my kids. And I'm thinking, and then I tapped on the door, and he looked over at me, and his eyes got great big, and he to the back room. And my kids took off after him, calling him Daddy. And it just, what heart I had left was gone. I mean, it just shattered it, you know. And she come to the door, and I just looked there and took off, got on my Harley, and I headed north out of Enterprise Road, and crying and running 100 mile an hour. And I don't know where I went. I don't know what I did. I don't know how long I was gone. But God had to be with me. He had been with me all the time. Now that I remember, when I was coming back from Valley Steel, many a night or many a morning, there used to be an iron bridge in between Sicily and Flora. There, and he'd wake me up every morning, just as I was heading for that. It wasn't my time. You know, we all got an expiration date. We don't know when it is. But God saved me. And he saved me when I was on that motorcycle. Because, I mean, you know, I can't even imagine being drunk on a motorcycle running 100 mile an hour. You know, anyway, I come back about a week later, and my grandparents, they said, by that time I was, me and another girl from Sicily was living together in Sicily. And they said, you know, we've got an offer on the farm, and you're not in no shape to, and my brothers had already decided they wanted to live their own lives now because they could see it was going downhill quick. And I said, yeah. I said, I think that's the best thing, you know. And so we sold the farm, the equipment, this, that, and I really, you know, so I went to work in the oil field. And of course, I was with a bad bunch of people there. I'm not saying oil field people are bad, but, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, they were thieving and stealing and drinking, and, you know, and I fell right in with it. You know, I did anything, everything that you could possibly think. You know, and two things I always said that I would never do. I seen my uncle weigh 225, worked at Caterpillar. I seen him get lung cancer, and he didn't weigh 100 pounds whenever he died from lung cancer. And I said I'd never smoke, and that was when I was just old enough to go behind the barn with the boys when we were bucking bales, and everybody was smoking, but I didn't smoke. I said I'd never smoke, and I'd never do drugs. I've seen people on drugs. Man, they got to be the scum of the earth. I mean, I'm telling you, I thought anybody that did drugs was, But if you put the right person that don't know Jesus Christ in the right place with the right people, anything can happen. You know, I got a job working in the Gulf of Mexico. I was driving back and forth by myself. This is before I was drilling around here, and I liked it. But I was having to drive from the coast of Louisiana all the way up here, working 7 and 7. And that got old, and then I got the opportunity to go to work for Odeco in South America. I worked off the coast of Brazil for about a year, working 28 and 28. And they flew me from Mount Vernon, Illinois, all the way to Rio de Janeiro. Then we'd take a chopper out 75 miles off the coast until we were coming in one time. And, you know, I really never did pray too much, but we were coming in on this chopper, and this chopper started to quit. It got to the point where you could almost start feeling it fall. And I prayed. I mean, I said, God, help me. Something in me still, God was there, you know. Of course, whenever the helicopter landed and I flew back I immediately called my supervisor and said, I ain't coming back. He said, that must have been one bad helicopter ride. And I said, why is that? He said, your whole crew quit. I said, oh. I said, well, yeah. And, you know, hindsight, I don't know, you know, life would have been different. But anyway, I started drilling around here. I drilled for Garden Drilling Company out of Salem. I drilled for Johnny Pryor. Some of you may know Johnny. you know. Anyway, I was drilling for a Illini drilling company just outside of Florida there, and my best friend and I really idolized him. But I always told everybody, I said, what you do at your own time is your own time. But when you come here to work. We're here to do our job. And that's what we did. But I come in the doghouse and I caught him doing a little line. I said, Dan, what are you doing? And he says, well, it ain't what you think. He was a car salesman. He could sell you anything. You go down to Brown Chevrolet and buy a Corvette and drive down by Fry's Auto, and he'd trade you an old Oldsmobile and you think you got a good deal. That's how good he was. He said, this isn't what you think it is. I said, what? He says, it's like a diet pill. I was a little heavier then. And he said, it gives you lots of energy. And I said, well, I was already working 12, 16 a day, you know. And then he explained the financial gains of it. And anyway, he had already laid out 2 lines and rolled up a $100 bill. And he said, just try it. It will not hurt you. I guarantee you it won't hurt you. So I did. And I said, Danny, you lied. It hurt my nose, my eyes, the back of my head. Oh, it hurt. But 30 minutes later, I was scrubbing the alley legs on Warner Tower. And I thought, I like this stuff. And I got involved with dealing drugs, meth. And it was hard around here because very few did it back then. You know, and he got busted, and this guy got busted, and everybody started trying to cheat me. And I knew that California was the place where it came from. And I found out a friend of mine that I went to school with had moved back from California. And I just knew if anybody did drugs, it'd be him. So I found out where he lived. It was in Dundas. I was told I had to tell this part. Anyway, I found out where he lived, and I knew he would be living in an old house with a wood stove and a bunch of hogs around it. So I went to Dundas, and I drove around, and I seen his house. I thought, Went up. Door opens, and here's this beautiful blonde wearing a rabbit fur coat. Wonder who that could be. Anyway, I thought, wow, can't figure this one out. I said, well, here's my number. I am a friend of his. They're out at a car auction. And I said, have him call me tomorrow. Anyway, another thing, that whenever we sold the farm and where I was living in Sisney, my grandparents come and bought the house right next to me. And that's just how close we were. I mean, after the sale of the farm, they could have went with any one of their daughters. They could have went with anybody, but they come because they wanted to be beside me, and I wanted them there. I needed them there. But you know, we take people for granted. You know, I do especially. I mean, you know, you can look at someone and they're there all the time, and sometimes you just take them for granted. But when I lost my grandparents, I mean, I thought that was going to be the end of my life. I really did. And I know my grandmother prayed for me. I just know that I remember when I was in Brazil and I was it was an old World War II tanker turned into a drill ship. And one night, we had not rough seas, but real deep, heavy seas. And there was I could see the crown lights about like the size of my finger of another rig. And I remember that rig going way up there real slow, and it'd get way up there and it'd hold. And then it would come down to about my feet. And I'm thinking, what in the world's going on around here? Well, anyway, we broke 2 anchor lines, and they thought they was going to have to detach from the well, but it all worked out. But during that time, I know I heard my grandma say it was going to be okay. I mean, I don't know. But when I lost my grandparents, you know, and I took them for granted. I'd be the first to admit it. and I'll be the first to tell them when I see them if I do, you know. But, you know, I talked to my friend, and I said, I got the money, and I got no way to getting the stuff. And he says, I can get the stuff, but I got no money. So I sent him. He brought back. I did good. We did good. And then he started cheating me and lying and everything else. And next thing you know, I gave him my last bunch of money, and him and her was going to go to California, but she didn't want to go. Anyway, I told him, I'll kind of watch out for her while you're gone. Needless to say, we got together, okay? And needless to say, he found out about it. So the next day he come in, kicked in the door. I think it was the day after that. Kicked in the door, thought he was going to catch something, and I had a gun, and I pulled it on him. And it's, you know, just one of them old things. And I said, do you got my money or the drugs? And he said, no. And I said, well, you don't have her anymore. And so we tried for a little bit to survive in Southern Illinois, and I could tell real quick it wasn't going to work. And I suggested that she call her mom and see if we could just go out there. And her mom said yes, as long as he isn't with her. And she said, no, I got a new he. So away we went. And I know California was different. I had been in cities, but not like live in them. You know what I mean? It's just a completely different thing. And I remember getting there, and it was like getting close to Christmas time, and the carbon monoxide was so thick, I didn't think I could breathe. And we went and looked at this apartment building, you know, and it's like a 2 or 3 story, and there were bars on all the windows and bars on all the doors. And I'm thinking, this is like a jailhouse thing, you know, here we can't do this. And anyway, we moved in with her mother, and I suppose you all know who I'm talking about now. But anyway, her mom was a great person. She really was, you know, and next thing we know, my ex was having trouble with my daughter. My daughter came out and stayed with us for about 6 months, and then she couldn't handle it, and she left. She had to go back home with her brother. And anyway, Carol was pregnant, and I was working on the oil rigs out there. One thing I found out really quick, if you didn't do meth, you did not work in the oil field. That's just the way it was. And of course, I did meth anyway, but this was good meth. This is different, you know. I did meth, and Carol ate. I would call her before I was getting ready to come home, what do you want? And she'd tell me Mexican or Chinese or whatever, you know. But it got to the point where I would get off work. I was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'd get off work. I'd go to the Chinese place, the Mexican place, the hamburger place, the whatever place, and just bring the smorgasbord, and there it was. And then I wouldn't have to go out again, you know. But the day before our son was born, April the 8th of 86, price of oil went down to nothing. I got laid off the day before, which in my time as working on the rigs, I had made a lot of connections, and I was already dealing, and my heart's desire was always to learn how to make it myself. Then I didn't have to worry about it because meth had become my God. I started doing meth probably in 1984. I was 33 years old. And anyway, I did the same thing again. I would go out into San Bernardino or Riverside County, wherever, and I'd be making meth, and I'd come back to LA, and I had my people that I'd always give Carol whatever she wanted, and then I would take Russell and go somewhere and be with him, because they had raided her mom's house looking for me. So that meant I was kicked out the door, which I don't blame her, you know. but I got into everything that you could possibly think of. I mean, I'm not bragging, but yeah, I am guilty. I am guilty. Paul said he's the chief of sinners. Well, that was before me. That's the way I look at it. And I'm sure I'm not as bad as, everybody thinks they're bad, but I'm not that bad. I just was. But all through that, though, I had friends and people that I knew that was dying and being killed. And for some reason, I was always not there. For some reason, I wasn't there. But after I couldn't go to Carol's mom, and by that time she'd already found somebody else. The police had come in and where we were at and took everything I had, everything I thought important. All my friends that I thought were friends were really just Klingons, because when I had nothing, they suddenly wasn't my friends, And you've seen the shows of the people pushing shopping cart and getting stuff out trash. That was me. I used to eat my food out from behind Food for Less and Albertsons and some of the grocery stores, and I would go into laundromats and steal clothes, and I had 2 different places that I could jump the fence at night and go in and take a shower and get it and swim. Nobody ever knew it. And I always, since meth was my God, I always had meth. But I always, all over LA, I would have a hiding spot for that time when I didn't. Probably still there today. I don't know. Anyway, I just got, really, really. But people would come and find me and then have me go get their drugs because I knew where to get it all the time anyway. I just never had the money, And I think it was 91, somebody had come and picked me up to go get some drugs, and we went down Anaheim Street. I'd been trashing that next day before, and I found a horseshoe. I thought, oh boy, it's going to change my luck. And I had it in my hip pocket. Oh devil, he's a liar. You know that, right? Anyway, we went down Anaheim Street, and it was just when people was getting off of work and across these tracks and flashing lights, no gates, just flashing lights. Everybody just driving through, back and forth. I went on down to where my friend was at, and he wasn't there, so we came back, and the guy that I was riding with, he comes up and he pulls right up on the tracks. And he's looking to his left, and I hear something. And I look, and from here to that wall is the front of a train. That's the last thing I remember until I come to. You don't see too many people that have been hit by a train. Well, I have been. And it hit, there was a girl in the front seat, the driver, and I was sitting in the seat right behind her, and the train hit right between me and her. And a friend of mine he was actually from Quincy, Illinois, was in the back. And anyway, to make a long story short, hopefully, she ended up with a broken leg here, broken ribs, broken arm, 100 stitches in her face. When I come to, I was shackled. I wasn't shackled down. I was held down with a thing on my neck, and I was bruised from neck, shoulders, ribs, everything. And they finally let me out and said, here's the therapist or whatever, but I went and got meth and then never looked back. But there was something that began to change for me about that time. I don't know what it was, but anyway, I didn't know what it was then. But I had my horseshoe. Well, of course, I didn't have it then. I don't know where it went. But, I thought, boy, it's a good thing I had that horseshoe, And that wasn't it. God just wasn't ready yet, or I wasn't ready for God. I don't know how it went, but anyway, things started changing after that. I would be in a car and turn on the radio station and couldn't hear nothing but a Christian station. I'd go to a phone booth and there'd be a track, Christian Tractor. I know this is weird, but I went into a bathroom stall one time, and you know how they are sometimes. Well, this one here was just almost pure white. And when I closed the door, it said, "Repent and you shall be saved." I'll never forget that. I mean, how, you know, but, you know, I was, my friend, whenever he had to wreck, went back to Quincy, Hannibal area. And anyway, he called me up and said, "If I send you money, could you send me?" And I said, "Yes." And that went on for a little while. And then next thing you know, I was flying. I would take a couple pounds of meth to me, walk through. I was a adrenaline junkie. I loved that, you know. But I mean, to take 2 pounds of dope to you and walk through customs is just, if that don't give you anyway, I did that a few times. And, you know, I decided I was going to drive one time, and I had a friend of mine with me that, you know, he was just a friend. He didn't have a part of it. But I was going home, going toward Illinois. If they would have waited another few miles, they could have got me for interstate transportation. You know, I'd still be in prison. But March the 1st of 1995, I remember getting pulled over, and they had the dog. I know that, you know, sometimes when you're doing that, you think you're invincible and you're above the law, you're smarter than everybody else, but you're not. And eventually you're going to get busted. And I did. And it's a funny thing that they put me and my friends got in the back seat of the car, and then they got out and left us alone. I thought, now this is kind of weird here. I never had this happen before. About 5 minutes later, the officer come and opened the door, and he picked up a recorder and just smiled. Because as soon as we was together, Scott said, "Tell him it's yours, tell him it's yours." I said, "Well, if they find it, they ain't gonna find it, but if they do, I'll tell them it's mine." And that was all on the recording, so they tore that thing apart and found it, and everybody was happy but us. Victorville jail, we went, you know. I got into San Bernardino County Jail, waiting trial, sentencing, and all that stuff. And, you know, it wasn't really too bad. We were locked down 21 hours, got out 3 hours in a day room. You know, I hooked up with some guys that used to cook, and we were trading recipes and playing spades, and 3 meals a day, and that wasn't enough, you know. I mean, knew I was looking at some time, but God has a way of, He knows. I'm so thankful that I came down from breakfast one morning. I went back up the stairs, started going in my cell, and I passed out. And I remember being wheeled on a gurney, and I was shackled hands and feet to the gurney, guards on both sides of me. But I remember the guy that I was looking at like that. He was dressed in white. I ain't saying he's an angel or whatever, but he just said 3 simple words. He said, "Are you saved?" And I passed back out. And do you know where my mind went? Do you know what? My mind went back to Vacation Bible School and the stuff that I was taught in Vacation Bible School. You know, so I mean, you know, we take kids for granted, the stuff that we teach them, but you know what? They're going to need that in life. They're going to need even little things. The little things that Jesus loved me, you know, that God's, you know, I mean, the verses came back to me. But I know I was reading here not too long ago in John 3, whenever Nicodemus was asking, you know, Jesus, and Jesus answered to him, said, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of water and spirit, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. And Nicodemus couldn't figure it out, but he was a teacher of the law, and then I just stumbled on to, in Ezekiel, kind of what that meant. In verse 24 of Ezekiel 36, it says, "Then I will sprinkle clean water on you." This is what God's doing. It's not man, it's God doing it. "I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will take the heart of stone out and of your flesh and give you a new heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them." Well, God did a work that day, because he did. He took a heart of stone out and he crushed it. I think he took his foot and just stomped it, because it was hard. And he gave me a heart of flesh. And when they told me I'd had a mild heart attack, but I knew what happened. I really did. I really knew what happened. My first thoughts was of my mom. My first thoughts was of my kids. A heart of flesh, and they took me back to the cell. This had never happened before. Announcement come over the speaker, "Does anyone want to speak to a chaplain?" I was right on that. I said, "Yes, I do." And I went down, and they took me down to a little room, shackled, of course, and I spoke with Pastor Paul, and he told me, he said, "You can be brand new. You can start over, brand new. It's just like you was born of new." And I said, "I want that." And he led me in the sinner's prayer. And the next day, whenever we went to down in the day room, there was a guy that sat over by himself reading a Bible. He was from Canada. He had got busted with kilos of cocaine in his dad's truck from Canada. So he was looking at he's probably still in, I don't know, but he's right with God, I know that. And, I got sentenced to Chino, and they had a prison ministry group come in every night. I was in chapel every night. It was, you've heard the story, me and God, That's the way it was. He had given me a New Testament only, and there was several groups that would come in. My favorite was a group called Cowboys for Christ. Wonder why. Anyway. But they had a program where if you did a Bible study for 6 weeks, they'd give you a Bible. And I've still got that Bible, And it says awarded to me, and I can't remember the date. But some of the guys at the chapel, they would get out. Of course, we'd always pray for them, and they'd get out. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they'd be right back in. I said, "What happened? Why?" We went back to our old neighborhood, and we just, and I thought they were just like really on fire, and they was really on fire. But, the more it come time for me to get out of prison, the more worried I got out. When I got out, I was going to be sent right back into the area. They wasn't going to send me to Victorville, or they were going to send me right back into Long Beach. I was scared. I didn't want out. Honestly, I didn't want to get out of jail. I'd had dreams that, when I got out, that people that I knew would just throw me drugs and say, "Here you are, come out." come up, whatever, you know. In my dreams, I'd say, no, but could I do that could I? Well, it come time to me to get out. Of course, the job they give me in the prison was, I was a cook. And guess what happened? I went from like 150 to 2 something. And so when I came time, I didn't have clothes, but churches had donated clothes to the prison, and I found probably the weirdest looking clothes you ever seen, you know. And in the meantime, I growed a beard, you know. But I had made contact with Carol and my son, and come to find out that she had been saved probably in 91 in that time zone area. And she told me that Russell, my son, had prayed for his dad to get off of drugs and come home. For 3 years, that boy had prayed that. And for 3 years, that's when things began to change in my life. So the prayers of children are precious and powerful. Anyway, I got out, called Carol, and she picked me up. And I got to see Russell for the first time, and this was in 95, and he was 9 years old. And he was on fire for the Lord, and so was Carol, and, you know, I did. Old devil worked. I had probably 3 or 4 days there that I was in a motel, and I went down to a friend of mine's house, and he threw me a big gold, and he said, here, that's yours. I said, no, I don't want it. Walked out. And then Carol had told me they had a Christian men's home that I could get into. And she invited me to church that next Sunday to meet the pastor. And I had a big old beard. I mean, you know, who cares? You're in prison, right? Anyway, I met Pastor Mark Marciel, and he took one look at it. He said, well, you can come in a men's home, but we're going to have to clean you up. And I did, but I wouldn't let him shave my mustache for some reason. I just, you know, I've always had it. And I said, okay. But anyway, it was a blessing because I was in that men's home. First 30 days, you're in the home. You study every day. You do the laundry. You do the quick cooking. You do the dishes. You do that. And after 30 days, you can get out and go look for a job. You know, that first 30 days, we had Chuck Smith's sermon notes that we did Bible studies with. And when it come time for my 30 days, you know, I got a job the first day. And just right after that, my daughter had called me and says, do you know you got a warrant in Illinois? And I thought, no. And then I got to remember, you know, I did have a case there, and I just never did. So I told Pastor Mark about it, and he says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, all my family is back there. I want to really go back. And he said, okay. So he called down there at Wayne County and said, I'm bringing him in. Do not, you know, I mean, he was the head chaplain of LA County jails. And he had a badge, LA County jail badge. I mean, he was, you know, we flew to Fairfield. I went before the judge. I pleaded guilty. They were getting ready to take me to, he said, no. I brought him, I was going to have to come back for sentencing. He said, no. I brought him here, I'll bring him back. The guys in the men's home were fasting and praying that I'd be able to come back. And it was a great celebration, it really was. I mean, the camaraderie that we had was unbelievable. And I went to work the next Monday. To make a long story shorter, the old devil, he's pretty good, you know. I had to crawl under this thing where they rolled heavy steel, and put it in a kiln, heated it red hot and bend it around. But anyway, that I had a ton of steel fall across my back. And the next thing you know, I'm in St. Francis Hospital. Nothing broken, but I'm bruised. I mean, my whole back, my hips, legs was bruised. Just a big bruise. And they were giving me morphine every 4 hours. 9 days straight. They give me morphine every 4 days. By the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th day, I was waiting for that 4 hours to come around. Little did I know I was hooked on morphine. And when it come time to let me out, I come out with a walker and some Tylenol. Well, I got back to the men's home about 4 hours. And let me tell you, I thought I was losing my mind. I really thought I was losing. I feel sorry for people who use a needle and have to go through the detox of that. I mean, it was like, and in the middle of the night in downtown Long Beach, I'm out there in the middle of the yard with a walker and I'm screaming, Jesus, help me. Jesus, please help me. You know, and some of the guys in the men's home knew what I was going through because they did heroin. And they asked me you know, and they said, you're gonna be like this for a couple of days. And of course they watched me and it got over. And later on, come time for me to go back for sentencing. We got on the plane. You know, by that time I'd got rid of my walker and I had crutches and, you know, and here I am. I'm coming down to go to court at Fairfield and I've got crutches on. And I'm sure they're all just laughing. Look at him. He's just faking, you know. I mean, come on now. Seriously, you know. But it was real. Anyway, I was shocked when I got in that courtroom. All of a sudden, the arresting officer, Scott Woods, state trooper, was sitting over there on the table, and there piled up was a little bit of drugs and a big pile of money. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I remember that now. And you know, whenever I just pleaded guilty, you know, I didn't, and they come back for sentencing. But the prosecuting attorney there wanted to give me 10 years. I mean, he had brought little children into the courtroom because he was going to make an example out of people who did drugs in Wayne County. You know, and my pastor got up and spoke, you know, how I'd changed. I wasn't the same. And then I got up and I did the same thing. You know, I told the kids, I just looked at them, I said, you know, I'm not the same. Jesus Christ, I've got Jesus Christ in my heart. And that judge, I seen another miracle. Because that judge and my pastor said, why don't you just sentence him to 3 years in the men's home? As 10 years in prison. And I seen the judge's heart change. I seen it. And he gave me 3 years in the men's home. And boy, you talk about victory. You talk about the guys in the home. What a statement that was for them, for everybody that was praying and fasting. I came back and I did 3 years in a men's home. The first time I was able to have a visit with Russell, I had to be chaperoned by another brother. It was just, you know, that kind of program. But we went to church. Every time they had church, if we didn't have church, we had somebody come in and give a Bible study. It was constantly being fed, you know. And I remember Luke 16. It was the rich man and Lazarus. It just come to me one day when I was studying. And one thing, whenever I first came back from seeing Pastor Paul, and my first prayer was, Lord, you have to take the drug, the desire, because I had been doing it for 11 years straight, every day. I had tried to quit a few times, but I couldn't do it. I had made up my mind that I was going to do meth for the rest of my life, but God had other plans. And my first prayer was, God, you have to take the desire for the drug away, and he did. I mean, it was just, I didn't have no desire for it. In fact, I didn't want no part of it. You know, but anyway, I got healed up from, you know, that. And in the meantime, Carol's heart, I guess, had softened toward me a little bit, you know, because I think when I first got out, she didn't want to be around me. I don't blame her, you know. And, you know, she was smart enough to know that, you know, people could fake being a Christian to get something, get whatever, you know. But 3 years in a men's home, and then when I got out, I got my own place, and I had my Christian brothers living with me, and I back to work in the oil field. But boy, you talk about, but also one of the neatest things is that when I was in the men's home, because Pastor Mark was the chaplain that had a lot of pull, I was able to go right back into some of the prisons that I had been in and minister. You talk about a blessing. And I love prison ministry. I'm not used to talking to normal folk, I guess you could say. Okay? I mean, and this is why it was so difficult for me to talk to you, because, I mean, you know, I was trash. I was a curb creature. But God saved me. God did the work. I didn't. I mean, all he did was get a hold of my heart and hold it for a second, or take it out and throw it away and give me a new one. You know? You know, I mean, all that you teach these kids, and I'd hate to think about being a kid in today's world. You know? But, you know, our life we ended up getting married in 98, and we lost a little girl. But I went to work in the oil field, and, you know, I wish when I had prayed and asked to take away the desire for drug, I wish I'd have had a whole list. I said, well, not just drugs, but, you know, because that old desire to provide, to work was still in me. You can ask her. I went to work for Baker Oil Tools, and they'd be calling me in the middle of the night to go to work. And, you know, of course, back then they had the radios where it was loudspeaker, you know, George, in the middle of the night, are you there? And Carol says, I wish they'd quit that. I wake up too, you know, that was, you know, but I got to thinking that they could not, you know, I mean, I worked hard and did a good job, but I knew there was something wrong with me, okay? And anyway, you know, I was old enough at the time I needed to take a colonoscopy, but when it come time for you, they'd tell me, well, there's a job on the islands that you need to do that, you know, only you could do. So I'd put it off so that I'd have to make another appointment 3 months later to do it. It happened again. You know, my boss came up to me, George, we got to have you on this job, you know. And I said, okay, so I chose work. The third time, I said, no, I already knew there was something not right. And I went to do the colon. They couldn't even do the colon. Couldn't even do it. I had cancer. And that's a mighty strong word, mighty scary word. And I reevaluated a lot of my priorities, you know. Anyway, I had the operation. Chu Wu and Hu was my doctors. They were good doctors, you know, Chinese doctors. And anyway, I had the operation. They took about a foot of my colon, and they said it had spread in my lymph nodes, that I was going to have to do chemo and radiation. I did that for almost 9 months. So I was totally out of work for about 11 months, and here I thought they could not survive without me. But just to come to find out, I was just a number to them. You know, you're just a number to this world, whether it's your driver's license number, social security number, credit card number, it don't make no difference. You're just a number. But God knows your name. Jesus knows your name. He knows you personally. He knows what you're thinking. He knows what you're thinking. He knows what your heart, your motives are, you know. And I know during that time, my brothers would call me, my kids would call me, and you know, I just wanted to go home. I wanted to come back home. I wanted to come back here. I wanted to come back home. And I talked to Carol about it, and she was ready. Her mom and dad had already passed, and you know, she was ready to come back home. And I don't know if I can get this thing to come back, but I wanted to read one more. Oh, I started to tell you about my gosh. I was reading Luke 16, was rich man and Lazarus. And in that part where he says, send Lazarus to tell my brothers. You know, and the thought come to me, if my dad is in hell, what could make hell worse? What could make hell worse? If you know, if you were in hell and you seen your son come to hell and you knew that you had a part of that, could that make hell worse? Yes. And anyway, my eyes isn't quite. Okay, I don't know what I touched, but whatever it wasn't right. But anyway, part of that, he says, I will deliver you from your uncleanness. I will wash you for your gain and multiply it and bring no famine to you. Then you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers. You shall be my people, and I will be your God. And that's in Ezekiel 28. And that's just exactly what happened. I came back here to dwell in the land of my fathers. God's word is true, Old Testament, New Testament. I had another eye-opening experience. I was with my sister about a year or so after I'd been back, and we were talking. We went over to see one of my aunts. We were talking, and I was telling her about Dad, and you know, because in that 4-room house, you know, us boys slept in one room, and there was a kitchen and a living room, and my mom and Dad and my sister slept in that room, and you know, with all going on, she was awake. And she said, didn't you know? And I said, what do you? She said, before Dad died, Grandma made it to my dad before he died. Before anybody else got there. My grandmother made it. I don't know if she ran. I don't know what she did. I don't know how. I was asleep. But she led my dad in the sinner's prayer before he died, and he accepted Jesus. And I did not know that till a few years ago. So, I mean, God is so good. I have not the words to even, but, you know, when I come back, I try to get into the prisons here because I love prison ministry, and I was finally able to go over to Centralia. And I was part of, you know, I don't know if you know Ray and Christine Sharp, and I was part of their team, and I got to go back into prison ministry. And because of COVID, there's no more prison ministry. And it's been a long time since I've given my testimony. And like I said, I hope that my testimony will touch, because, you know, you think a lot about prison ministry, and you always think jailhouse religion, you know. But those poor guys are when they get out, they have to come back into the same old tractor rut that they were in, you know, unless they know Jesus truly in their heart, you know. And I just praise God and I thank God mostly for his long suffering, for allowing me to live long enough to finally get it, because I was 44 years old. I had 44 years in this world, and I'm 70 now. But and say I used to run cross country. I loved to run cross country because I'd always keep the leader in sight, keep my eyes on him, keep my eyes on him. And then about halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, I'd get a second wind. I don't know if anybody's ever run enough to know what that is, but it's just like you get a second gear. You just shift another gear, and then you move on up and you get right behind that leader. When you make that last curve for the home stretch, then you sprint. I'm 70 and I look in the mirror and I know how old I am. I know my time is, we never know when our expiration date is, but I got my eyes on the leader, and I'm sprinting to finish. I want to finish well, like Paul says. One of my favorite scriptures, and I'll end with this. I know I can get this thing to work again. Sorry. Anyway, it's 2 Timothy 4, starting in verse 1. I had it memorized, to be honest with you, but right now it's not coming back to memory. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "In the presence of God and Christ Jesus, who will judge the living and the dead, in view of his appearing and his kingdom, I give you charge." This is Paul telling Timothy. It says, "Preach the word, be prepared." Even if you're not prepared, be prepared. "In season and out of season, correct, rebuke, encourage with great patience and careful instruction." And that's another thing. I have a job had a job, where I would go out on the rigs, and I would go from rig to rig, and it wouldn't take long for them to realize that I didn't listen to the jokes. I would leave. And whenever they would cuss, I would just turn around, and it wasn't long before I would have some of the guys on the rig would be coming up for me and asking for prayer they were having troubles doing whatever, and for the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine, and boy, ain't that the truth. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them great numbers of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to the myths. But you keep your head in all situations, endure hardships, and do the work of an evangelist. Discharge all duties of your ministry. Fulfill your ministry. We've all got a ministry. Each and every one of us, whether it's kids, whether it's... And then Paul's, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and my time of departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. Now there is stored up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all them that are longing for his appearing." And I am. We talk about pre-trib, mid-trib, back-trib, any trib. I don't care. I'm ready. I want to be ready. Whatever kind of trib comes, I want to fly away, and I want to be on that white horse, and don't want to be looking at that white horse coming at me. I want to be on that white horse, in that, riding with the saints.
Yeah.
I want to keep my eyes on Jesus. I want to finish the race well. Amen.
Amen.